Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear is one of the more extraordinary scheduling stories in the entire history of the G7, a moment that tells you less about calendars and dates and far more about where the real power in the world now sits. The G7 summit, the gathering of some of the most powerful industrialized democracies on the planet, has been delayed. And the reason for that delay is what makes this story so remarkable. The summit's start was pushed back to accommodate one man, the President of the United States. World leaders, including Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney, have been made to wait, their schedules rearranged around a presidential birthday and an event at the White House. So tonight, I am going to show you exactly what happened, why the timing is so unusual, and what observers say is the real story unfolding beneath the surface of this summit. The careful choreography of an entire gathering of nations around a single, unpredictable leader. Stay with me, because a summit reshaped around a birthday reveals just how much the world's most important meetings now revolve around Washington. Let me start with the facts of the delay, because they are genuinely striking. The summit was pushed back by a full day, and the reason was an announcement from President Trump. The White House revealed that it would host a UFC fight, a mixed martial arts event, on the 14th of June. And that date carries multiple layers of significance. The 14th of June is Flag Day in the United States, a day of patriotic observance. But it is also President Trump's 80th birthday. So you have a convergence of events, a UFC fight at the White House, Flag Day, and the President's 80th birthday, all landing on the same date. And as a result of this White House event, the leaders' gathering, the G7 summit itself, was rescheduled. It now runs from the 15th to the 17th of June, shifted to make room for the president's plans. I want you to sit with how unusual this is, because it is not a small thing. The G7 is one of the most significant gatherings in the world. It brings together the leaders of major democracies to discuss the most pressing global issues, economic challenges, security concerns, matters that affect billions of people. The scheduling of such a summit is normally a carefully negotiated affair, balancing the calendars and priorities of multiple world leaders and host nations. And yet, in this case, that entire gathering was delayed by a day to accommodate a UFC fight, Flag Day, and a birthday at the White House. That is, by any measure, an unusual reordering of priorities. It signals something about the dynamics at play, about whose schedule and whose preferences take precedence when the most powerful nations come together. Now let me give you the context of the summit itself, because the host details add texture to the story. Prime Minister Carney is visiting Ireland and France in connection with this G7 summit, which runs from the 15th to the 17th of June in the town of Évian-les-Bains. And France, as the host nation, has said that the focus of the summit will be on reducing global inequalities. That is the stated agenda, the official purpose, an effort to address the gaps between richer and poorer parts of the world. This also marks the second time that Évian-les-Bains has hosted a G7 summit, giving the location a certain historical weight. And the gathering is not limited to the core G7 members. Invited countries include Brazil, India, Kenya, and South Korea, broadening the conversation to include important voices from beyond the traditional group. So, on paper, this is a substantive summit with a meaningful agenda and a wide range of participants. But here is where the story takes its most revealing turn, because observers say the real story is not the official agenda at all. The real story is the choreography around one leader, and this is the insight I really want you to focus on tonight. According to the international affairs professor Fen Osler Hampson, the leaders at this summit will have to focus on, in his words, managing Trump. Managing Trump. Think about what that phrase implies. It suggests that a significant portion of the energy and attention at this gathering of world leaders will be devoted not to the stated agenda of reducing global inequalities, but to the delicate task of handling the American president, navigating his presence, working around his unpredictability. The summit, in other words, has a hidden agenda beneath the official one, and that hidden agenda revolves entirely around one person. Hampson went further, and his observations are worth examining closely. He noted that the real discussions, the substantive conversations among the leaders, will happen when Trump is not in the room. Let that sink in. The suggestion is that the genuine work of the summit, the meaningful exchanges among the leaders, will take place in the moments when the American president is absent. And Hampson described the challenge these leaders face in vivid terms, characterizing the situation as dealing with a president who is, in his words, irascible, unpredictable, and making life difficult for everyone. Those are strong words from an international affairs expert. Irascible meaning quick to anger, unpredictable meaning impossible to plan around with confidence, making life difficult for everyone. This is a portrait of a leader whose very presence reshapes the dynamics of the entire gathering, forcing the other leaders to adapt and maneuver around him. Let me explain why this dynamic is so significant, because it goes to the heart of how international diplomacy now functions. In a normal summit, the leaders gather as relative equals, each representing their nation, working together toward shared goals. But what Hampson is describing is something different. A gathering where one leader looms so large, is so unpredictable and difficult, that managing him becomes a central preoccupation. The other leaders must coordinate not just on policy, but on how to handle the American president, how to keep him engaged without provoking him, how to advance their goals in the spaces when he is not present. That is an extraordinary inversion of how these gatherings are supposed to work. Instead of the summit being about the collective agenda, it becomes, in significant part, about navigating the moods and movements of a single figure. And this connects directly to the scheduling story we began with, because the delay for the birthday and the UFC fight is really just the most visible symptom of a deeper reality. If the summit can be rescheduled around the president's personal plans, if the leaders must orient their gathering around accommodating him, then that tells you everything about the dynamic Hampson is describing. The birthday delay is not just a quirky scheduling footnote, it is a concrete, tangible illustration of how much the entire gathering now revolves around Washington, and around this one leader in particular. The choreography that Hampson speaks of begins before the summit even starts, with the very dates being arranged around the president's preferences. The managing of Trump is not just something that happens in the room, it shapes the calendar itself. For Carney specifically, all of this makes the timing especially delicate, and I want to draw out why. Consider Carney's position. Just 1 year ago, he hosted the G7 summit himself, in Alberta. He was the host, the leader setting the agenda, the one around whom that gathering was organized. And now, a year later, he is set to rejoin the world leaders, including Trump, attending the summit in Évian-les-Bains from the 15th to the 17th of June. So Carney goes from being the host who shaped a summit to being one of the leaders who must now navigate a summit reshaped around the American president. That is a notable shift in role and in context. And given everything we have discussed about Carney's careful, strategic approach to dealing with Trump, his softer tone, his quiet diplomacy, his efforts at managing the relationship, this summit represents a particularly sensitive test of that approach, played out on the world stage alongside the very leader he has been so carefully handling. Let me put this in the larger context of everything we have been following, because it ties together beautifully with the story of Carney's recent moves. We have watched Carney soften his tone toward Trump, choosing diplomacy over confrontation. We have watched him travel across Europe, building alternative relationships, delivering his bold message in Dublin about middle powers not groveling before Washington. We have watched him pursue a pragmatic reciprocity strategy on tariffs. And now, all of that careful positioning comes to a head at this G7 summit, where Carney must sit in the same room as Trump, participate in the delicate choreography of managing him, and pursue Canada's interests in an environment shaped entirely around the American president. The summit is, in a sense, the stage on which all of Carney's recent strategy will be tested. How he navigates this gathering will reveal a great deal about whether his approach can actually deliver results. I do want to offer some balance here, because it would be easy to overstate the drama, and a fair analysis requires acknowledging the other side. It is worth remembering that summits being scheduled around the availability and preferences of major leaders is not entirely unprecedented. The United States is the most powerful member of the G7, and a degree of accommodation to the American president is, in some sense, a reflection of that reality rather than something wholly new. And while Hampson's characterization of Trump is pointed, it is the assessment of one analyst, an international affairs professor offering his read on the dynamics. Other observers might frame it differently, might see the summit as more functional than the managing Trump narrative suggests. So while the birthday delay is genuinely unusual and the choreography around Trump is real, we should be careful not to assume the entire summit is consumed by it. The official agenda, reducing global inequalities, remains, and substantive work may well get done. Still, even with that balance in mind, the symbolism of this moment is hard to ignore, and I think it captures something true about the current state of global affairs. A G7 summit, a gathering of major democracies meant to address the world's most pressing challenges, reshaped around a birthday, a UFC fight, and Flag Day. Leaders made to wait, their schedules rearranged, observers describing the central task as managing one unpredictable president, with the real discussions happening when he is not in the room. Whatever balance we apply, the underlying picture is striking. It underscores just how much the gathering, and indeed much of global diplomacy, now revolves around Washington and around this one leader in particular. The scheduling story is a window into a larger truth about where power sits, and how the other nations of the world must arrange themselves around it. And for Carney, that truth defines the challenge ahead. He arrives at this summit as the careful, strategic navigator we have come to know, the leader who has chosen quiet diplomacy and patient relationship building over loud confrontation. He must now apply that approach in the most demanding possible setting, a summit literally reshaped around the president he has been so carefully managing, surrounded by other leaders engaged in the same delicate choreography. It is a high-stakes moment, a test of whether his measured strategy can hold up under the pressure of direct, in-person diplomacy with Trump and the other G7 leaders. The outcome of this summit, the relationships forged, the understandings reached, and the way Trump is or is not successfully managed, will tell us a great deal about whether Carney's entire approach is working. So when you put all of this together, the shape of the story becomes clear. In one of the more unusual scheduling stories in G7 history, the summit's start was delayed by a day to accommodate President Trump, after the White House announced it would host a UFC fight on the 14th of June, which is both Flag Day and Trump's 80th birthday, pushing the leaders' gathering to the 15th through the 17th. The summit takes place in Évian-les-Bains, with France focusing the agenda on reducing global inequalities and inviting countries like Brazil, India, Kenya, and South Korea. But observers say the real story is the choreography around one leader, with Professor Fen Osler Hampson noting that the leaders will have to focus on managing Trump, that the real discussions will happen when he is not in the room, and describing a president who is irascible, unpredictable, and making life difficult for everyone. And for Carney, just 1 year after hosting the G7 in Alberta, the timing is delicate as he rejoins world leaders, including Trump, in this reshaped gathering. The bottom line is this: a summit reshaped around a birthday underscores just how much the gathering now revolves around Washington. And that reality sets the stage for one of the most significant tests yet of Mark Carney's careful approach to handling the American president. The scheduling delay, unusual as it is really a symbol of a deeper dynamic. The way an entire gathering of world leaders must now arrange itself around one unpredictable figure. How Carney navigates this moment, how he manages Trump while advancing Canada's interests, and how the other leaders coordinate around the same challenge will reveal whether quiet diplomacy and patient strategy can truly deliver in the highest stakes environment of all. The summit is set, the leaders are gathering, and the choreography is about to begin. So I will leave you with this question to consider. When a gathering of the world's most powerful democracies must reshape itself around the birthday and preferences of a single leader, what does that tell us about where real power now lies? And can leaders like Carney truly advance their nation's interests in a world that increasingly revolves around Washington? That is the question hanging over this summit, and the answer will say a great deal about the future of global diplomacy. This is a story I will be following at every turn, every moment of the summit, every interaction between Carney and Trump, every signal from the gathering in Évian-les-Bains, and every development in the choreography around the American president, so that you always have the clearest and most honest picture of where this is truly heading. Thank you so much for watching our coverage of the G7 summit delayed for President Trump's birthday and the delicate diplomacy facing Mark Carney and the world's leaders. I would love to hear what you think, so drop your view in the comments below. Does a summit reshaped around one leader concern you, or is it simply the reality of American power? If this breakdown helped you understand what is really going on beneath the surface, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so that the instant there is fresh news on this story, you will be among the first to know. I will see you in the next one.